everyone, welcome back to our channel. So we have started with the neuroanatomy. Those who have not subscribed to the channel, do subscribe now so that you will receive the notifications. In the last video we have covered the sulci and gyri of cerebrum. So in this video we will see the functional areas of the cerebrum. Before we start with the functional areas of the cerebrum, we will revise what we have seen in the sulci and gyri of the cerebrum video. So now this is the model of the brain. Now we will see the cerebrum here. So the cerebral hemispheres are separated from each other by the median longitudinal fissure. Each hemisphere presents three surfaces. This is the superolateral surface, and this is the medial surface, and this is the inferior surface, and it has three borders. So this is the supromedial border. In the inferiorly we have two borders, infromedial border and infrolateral border. So this is the infromedial border and infrolateral borders, and three poles. This is the frontal pole, and this is the temporal pole, and this is the occipital pole. So these are the three surfaces and three borders we have seen. Types of sulci also we learnt in the last class. Limiting sulcus. Limiting means in between two functional areas. Example, central sulcus. So this is the central sulcus. We will now highlight the central sulcus. So the central sulcus is in between the two functional areas. So this is the central sulcus. So this is the central sulcus. Axial sulcus in the middle of a functional area. So that is in the posterior part of the calcarine sulcus. So calcarine sulcus, we will see the medial surface. In the medial surface, the calcarine sulcus is present. So this is the medial surface. We will see the calcarine sulcus. So this is the calcarine sulcus. So this calcarine sulcus is in the middle of the visual area. So that is the calcarine sulcus. Operculated means containing many functional areas in its walls, lips, floor. Example, lunate sulcus. So lunate sulcus is in this is here. So this is the lunate sulcus, we will see. So this is the lunate sulcus. So these are the types of the sulci and gyri we have learnt in the last class. We have also learnt the other classification of the sulci. Complete, incomplete. Complete means extending up to the ventricles. Incomplete, those do not extend up to the ventricles. Complete example, collateral and calcarine sulcus. Other pattern means another classification, primary and secondary. Primary, developing independently. Secondary, in the development they depend on the other factors, lateral sulcus and Pareto occipital sulcus. So these are the three types of classification of the sulci. Now each hemisphere is divided classically into 6 lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital, insular and limbic lobe. Insular and limbic lobe we will see in the last. First frontal, parietal, temporal, occipital we will see. These lobes, how they are separated from each other by some important sulci: central sulcus, lateral sulcus, Pareto occipital sulcus, preoccipital notch, cingulate and collateral sulcus. We will see one by one. First we have to see the two important sulci in the superolateral surface. Central sulcus of Rolando. So this is the central sulcus of Rolando, which is a limiting sulcus. So that is the central sulcus. Another sulcus is lateral sulcus of SYLVIUS. This consists of a stem and 3 rami. This is one rami, this is another rami, and this is the another rami. So these are the two important sulci transverse this surface. We will first see the central sulcus. Central sulcus begins at the supromedial margin. So this is the supromedial margin, begins at the supromedial margin, slightly behind the frontal and occipital poles, and passes sinuously downward, forward, laterally, making an angle of 70 degree with the median plane. So that is the central sulcus. Lateral sulcus of SYLVIUS consists of a stem and 3 rami. It starts in the inferior surface. Stem is situated on the inferior surface, so this is the stem. It starts from this part, that is the anterior perforated substance, to the infrolateral margin. Then where it divides into 3 rami. Yes, it divides into 3 rami. Yes, here anterior horizontal, ascending rami, and their continuation will be called as posterior ramus. Anterior horizontal and ascending rami, they are about 2.5 centimeter long. Posterior ramus is about 7.5 centimeter long. Area below the anterior horizontal ramus. So this will be called as pars orbitalis. The area between the anterior horizontal and anterior ascending will be called as the pars triangularis. Rest of the area above the posterior ramus will be called as pars posterior. Now the Pareto occipital sulcus. Yes, Pareto occipital sulcus cuts the supromedial margin of the hemisphere about 5 centimeter in front of the occipital pole. So this is the Pareto occipital sulcus. Same opposite to the Pareto occipital sulcus. Opposite to the Pareto occipital sulcus. So this is the Pareto occipital sulcus on the supromedial margin. Infrolateral margin presents a notch that will be called as pre-occipital notch. So these are the things we should know. We have to how to divide this surface into 4 lobes. So first lobe, we have to first line joining the Pareto occipital sulcus and the pre-occipital notch. So we have to draw the first line. This is the imaginary first line, Pareto occipital sulcus and the pre-occipital notch. Another line joining the lateral sulcus to the first line. So these are the 2 imaginary lines we have to draw. So that now we have divided this lobe, this suprolateral surface into 4 lobes. So what are the 4 lobes? We will see now. The part behind this first line will be called as the occipital lobe. The part behind the lateral sulcus will be called as temporal lobe. The part behind this central sulcus will be called as the parietal lobe. The part in front of the central sulcus will be called as the frontal lobe. So these are the things, 4 lobes we have seen. We will side by side cover the insula also. What is insula? A pyramidal shape submerged cortex known as insula or island of Riehl is situated at the bottom of the stem and the posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus. If you remove this cortex in this area around the stem and posterior ramus of the lateral sulcus, you have a submerged cortex that is called insula. So it is the submerged cortex, so that it will be called as the insular lobe. Beneath the insula lie successively claustrum, external capsule and lentiform nucleus. So this may be asked as the short notes for you. So now we will see the Sulci and Gyri on each lobe, starting from the frontal lobe. So we will start with the frontal lobe here. Frontal lobe first, central sulcus, you know, that is the central sulcus. So this is the central sulcus. So pre-central sulcus lies in front of the pre-central sulcus. So this is the pre-central sulcus. So the part between these two sulci will be called as the precentral gyrus. This is motor in function. Now the remaining we will see. So this is the superior frontal sulci, and this is the inferior frontal sulci. So that this lobe is this part in front of the precentral sulcus is divided into 3 gyri: superior frontal gyrus, middle frontal gyrus, and inferior frontal. So 2 sulci and 3 gyri. So that is about the frontal lobe. Now we will see the parietal lobe. So this is the parietal lobe. We will see parietal lobe behind the central sulcus. So that is the central sulcus. We know this is the central sulcus. Behind the central sulcus, post central sulcus. So this gyrus will be the post central gyrus, which is sensory in function. Then the remaining part of the parietal lobe is divided by the intraparietal sulcus into 2. So 1 sulci, 2 gyri. Superior parietal lobule, inferior parietal lobule. Surrounding this Pareto-occipital sulcus, so you know this is the Pareto-occipital sulcus, cuts the occipital pole, cuts the supromedial margin in front of the 5 cm in front of the occipital pole. So this surrounding this part gyri will be called as the arcus Pareto-occipitalis. So now we will see the inferior lobule of the parietal lobe. Inferior lobule of the parietal lobe is approached by the, so this is the supramarginal and this is the angular gyrus. So we have completed the parietal lobe. Now we will see the temporal lobe. So this is the temporal lobe. It is easy for us. Temporal lobe, 2 sulci, 3 gyrus. So this is superior temporal sulcus. This is inferior temporal sulcus. So three gyrus are superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, and inferior temporal gyrus. So these are the 2 sulci and 3 gyri. Now we will see the occipital lobe. Yes, this is the occipital lobe. Now we will see. So if you see the occipital lobe, which is separating the parietal lobe and occipital lobe, is the this Pareto-occipital sulcus. So behind the Pareto-occipital sulcus, this will be called as transverse occipital sulcus, which forms the posterior boundary of the arcus Pareto-occipitalis. Then lateral occipital sulcus divides this occipital lobe into superior occipital gyri and inferior occipital gyri. Lunate sulcus is situated outside the occipital pole. So it is in the lunate shape. Calcarine sulcus cuts the occipital pole. Yes, this is the calcarine sulcus which cuts the occipital pole. Gyrus descendens intervenes between the lunate and the, so this is the gyrus descendens in between the lunate and the superior and inferior occipital gyri. So these are the sulci and gyri in the 4 lobes of the suprolateral surface. So this suprolateral surface may be separately asked as theory question for you along with the blood supply of the suprolateral surface. Now we will see the sulci and gyri on the medial surface. So this is the medial surface of cerebrum. So medial surface of cerebrum, first sulcus you should know is, before sulcus you should know this is the commissural band of fibers called as corpus callosum. Just outside the corpus callosum, this is the callosal sulcus. So that's immediately above the corpus callosum. Outside the callosal sulcus, another sulcus you can see, this is the cingulate sulcus. So in between the cingulate sulcus and callosal sulcus, this part is called as the cingulate gyrus. So that forms a part of the limbic lobe. Now you have to see the outer zone outside the cingulate gyrus. So first this part, this is frontal pole. So frontal pole, this gyrus is called medial frontal gyrus. So that is a vertical sulcus separating this medial frontal gyrus, and this part is called paracentral lobule. So this is the paracentral lobule, which is having the commencement of the central sulcus. So this is the commencement of the central sulcus. Then two more sulci in this area you should know. This is the Pareto occipital sulcus, which we have learnt in the supralateral surface, and this is the Calcarine sulcus. Pareto occipital sulcus is the secondary sulcus, begins from the supromedial margin about 5 centimeters from the occipital pole. Calcarine sulcus extends forwards from the occipital pole slightly above the medial occipital border and joins with the Pareto occipital sulcus. So this triangular area between this Pareto occipital sulcus and Calcarine sulcus will be called as cuneus. So in front of cuneus, this quadrilateral area will be called as the precuneus. So this is the precuneus. And this below this Calcarine sulcus, this part is called lingual gyrus. So these are the outside the cingulate sulcus. We have 5 gyri from front to back: medial frontal gyrus, paracentral lobule, precuneus, cuneus, and lingual gyrus. So these are the sulci and gyri in the medial surface of the cerebrum. Now we will see the inferior surface of the cerebrum. So this is the inferior surface of the cerebrum. This inferior surface of the cerebrum is divided into 2 parts. Yes, this is the inferior surface of the cerebrum between two borders. Inferior surface between 2 borders. What are the borders? I will try to show it clearly. 2 borders. What are the borders? Infromedial and infrolateral borders. Now it is seen clearly. So this is the infromedial border and this is the infrolateral border. So this part is divided into 2 parts. This is the orbital part, which rests on the roof of the orbit, and this is the tentorial part, which rests on the tentorium cerebelli, that is the dural fold. So we will see first orbital part. There is a olfactory sulcus. So that this gyrus will be called as gyrus rectus. Rest of the surface is divided by the H-shaped sulcus into 4 area: anterior orbital gyrus, posterior orbital gyrus, medial orbital gyrus, and lateral orbital gyrus. Tentorial surface presents 2 anteroposterior sulci. They are the occipitotemporal. This is occipitotemporal and collateral sulcus. So that this area is divided into 3 gyri. This is the collateral sulcus and this is the occipitotemporal. So these gyri are the parahippocampal gyrus, medial occipitotemporal, and lateral occipitotemporal. So this occipitotemporal, because they are present in 2 lobes. So we have revised again the sulci and gyri of the cerebrum, which we have covered in the last video. Now we will move on to the functional areas of the cerebrum. Broadly speaking, cortical areas are subdivided into motor, sensory, and psychical. Motor areas are further divided into primary motor area, premotor area, supplementary motor area, and prefrontal area. So motor area, mainly we will start first. Primary motor area, that is area number 4. What is that? Is the precentral gyrus. So this is the area number 4, which is the precentral gyrus. Premotor area, that is formed by the posterior parts of the superior, middle and inferior frontal gyrus. So this is the posterior parts of the superior, middle and inferior frontal gyri. They will be the area number 6 and 8. They are premotor area. Supplementary motor area is present in the medial surface of the hemisphere. That is the posterior part of the medial frontal gyrus. Then the remaining part of the frontal lobe will be the area number 9 to 12, which is controlling the mostly of the psychological or depth of the feeling of the individual. This primary motor area, that is area number 4, includes the precentral gyrus, extends to the medial surface of the hemisphere also. So this is extending from the medial surface of the hemisphere. So starting from this medial surface of the hemisphere, extending to the supralateral surface, and the body is represented upside down. So this face and all is represented in the medial surface, and the remaining parts are represented in the supralateral surface. They control the movements of the voluntary muscles of the contralateral side of the body. So head is below. So head is below and leg end up. Below the knee, centers for movements of contralateral lower extremity. Below the knee, micturition, defecation also are present in the paracentral lobule. The extent of the cortical area depends on the skill of the movements and not on the size of the muscle. Lips, tongue, hands have the more representation in the cortex. This is the motor area. Premotor area, we will see premotor area, that is the premotor area is in front of the precentral gyrus. So that is the premotor area. So this is the premotor area. So as if like this programs the movements, and movement is executed by the precentral gyrus. Then in this we have also the BROCA'S area of speech. That is the lower part of the area 6 will be called as the BROCA'S area of the speech. 44-45, that is motor speech area. This is motor speech area. And also area 8 is the frontal eye field. Sensory areas now we will see. Again they have same primary sensory, secondary sensory and sensory association areas. Primary sensory will be the postcentral gyrus. That is, you have to draw 3 lines, 3, 1, 2 from front to back. Secondary somasthetic area will be the posterior parts of the postcentral gyrus. And somasthetic association area will be the areas 7 and 5, 7 of superior parietal lobule. So this is association area. So this is association area, that is the superior parietal lobule. Higher association area is area number 40 of supramarginal gyrus. So this is the supramarginal gyrus. We have learnt what is that. It is around the superior, around the stem of the posterior ramus. That will be called as the area number. So supramarginal gyrus, that is the area number 40. That is the higher sensory area. Now we will see the visual area. Primary visual area 17 along the lips and walls of the posterior part of the calcarine sulcus. So this is the calcarine sulcus cutting the occipital pole, we have learnt. So around that area will be called as 17 visual area. That includes the also in the medial surface. Yes, this is the mainly in the medial surface visual area. It includes the cuneus and the, so around this is the calcarine sulcus, that is the visual area. That will be the cuneus and the lingual gyrus. Visual association area, areas 18 and 19 surrounding the primary visual area. So surrounding this both on the medial and supralateral surface, that will be called as the area number 18 and 19. Higher visual association area is present in the inferior parietal lobule around the upturned margin of the superior temporal sulci. That is the angular gyrus. That is the area number 39. So that is the higher visual association area. Now we will see the primary auditory area. Primary auditory area is present on the anterior transverse temporal gyrus, that is present on the upper surface of superior temporal gyrus. So this is the superior temporal gyrus. You know, this is the superior temporal gyrus. So this is superior temporal gyrus. Upper surface you have to see. That is the anterior transverse temporal gyrus. That is the area number 41. So that is area number 41, Hessel's gyrus. Auditory association area, that is area number 42, behind the area 41. Higher auditory area, rest of the superior temporal gyrus will be called as area 22. That is the Vernix area. Dominant hemisphere presents 4 speech centers we have learnt. First, now this is the area 22. That is the superior temporal gyrus. That is Vernix area of speech, recognizes familiar sounds and words. Area 39 of angular gyrus. Yes, this is the area 39 of angular gyrus, recognizes the objects by sight. Area 40 of supramarginal gyrus, recognizes familiar objects with the help of the touch. So these 3 areas are called sensory speech areas. So these 3 areas are called sensory speech area. Area 44 and 45, which is present in here, is the 44 and 45 is the BROCA'S area of speech, that is the motor area. All these speech areas are connected by the association fiber arcuate fasciculus. Function of the limbic lobe will be the, again mainly on the addiction capabilities of the individual and also the psychological abilities of the individual. That they are the functions of the insular lobe. Limbic lobe, now we will see. Limbic lobe includes septal area. So this is septum pellucidum. So this is septal area. Cingulate gyrus. So this is cingulate gyrus. And also the parahippocampal gyrus on the inferior surface, in contact with the primary olfactory cortex of the piriform lobe. So these are the limbic lobe. So we have covered all the sulci and gyri in the 4 lobes in detail, both on the suprolateral surface, medial surface, infrolateral surface, and in also we have added the functional areas of the cerebrum in this video. With the highlighter we have described in detail. I hope you should have understood this topic very clearly. With the next topic in the neuroanatomy, we will see in the next class. Those who have not subscribed to the channel, do subscribe now. Keep watching the videos. Don't forget to press the like button and share button of the video if you like.